The title of this webinar is Human Dignity and Resilience, Migrants and Hosting Communities. It's a webinar that we have co-organized with Sant'Egidio, with Sant'Egidio European Federation. Here we have the Secretary General, Professor Jan, that we'll hear him just after I've finished speaking these introductory words. And I have to welcome you first. So I welcome, first of all, the migrant, a migrant that we want to hear their voices today and hear their experience. So we have Matthew. Is he here? Yes, you're there. Matthew, welcome. And then we have also Arlette. She's not here with us, but we'll hear her testimony today. She's a member of a hosting community. And then we have with us two members of the European Parliament. I see Javier Zarzalejos. He's from the EPP group, and welcome for this meeting with us. We're very pleased to have you here. And then also Damian Boesleger will join us later from the Green Group European Free Alliance. So they will speak to us about what's the experience, the way that we can face this important issue in the European Union. And then we have also an academic with us, Dr. Alkisti Alevropoulo Malli. Have I pronounced it well? Yes. And she's also a photographer, so she also gives us a first-hand experience. So what is the sense of this webinar? I'm only just going to speak 2 minutes. The idea is maybe to have a contra narrative to what we usually hear. We normally think about migrant people as in a very vulnerable situation, as people to be helped. And we want to change a bit that way of thinking or that way of seeing things. Migrants have also a lot to offer. And we want to focus this afternoon on this concept of resilience, their strength, their ability to overcome difficulties, their tenacity. So the idea today is hearing this first-hand witness of what it means to be a migrant, to come to the European Union, the difficulties that they have to face, also asylum seekers, also refugees. This will be the first part of the meeting. And then the second part of the meeting will be from a political point of view, from policymakers. What can we do in the European Union? We know that there's a pact on migration and asylum presented by the Commission in September, the European Commission. It's under now discussion. So is this going to be a solution? Is it not? Do we have to maybe see it a bit more in detail? So this is a bit the sense of a meeting, and understanding that the people that migrate are people in the first place, and getting to know them, getting to hear them makes us see them not as numbers, but as people as us. So this is very important, I think. And this is something that Pope Francis insists very much. One thing is to see statistics and numbers. Another thing is to see the person in the face and speak to him, hear him or her. So this is very important. So I don't want to take more time. I think it's a very interesting webinar that has been proposed this afternoon to really see this question directly. So welcome to all. Thanks for being here. And thanks to Sant'Egidio for collaborating with us, with COMECE, and organizing this event. And now I leave the word to Professor Jan de Volder, Secretary General of Sant'Egidio here in the European Federation. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Father Manuel Barrios Prieto. Thank you. Welcome to all those who are connected to this webinar. We are really happy to have you. I thank also COMECE, Mr. Jose Luis Bazan and his team, and also the Sant'Egidio team for this flawless collaboration. I hope that also our webinar will be flawless. Yes, as Father Manuel has said, it is important to listen to migrants, because there is a lot of talk about them, but still we do not speak and too much with them, and we do not listen too much to them. And often they are seen by some part of the population as dangerous. Others in the society want to do something about the humanitarian situation around the European Union and also inside European Union, but they don't know how to do that. So there is also an idea of powerlessness, I would say. Now, and I think what is often overlooked, and that's the topic of our seminar, is what is often overlooked is that the migrants, many migrants are tough people. They are people with a lot of talents, with a lot of creativity, and a lot to offer. And they, in order to come to Europe, to build a better future for themselves, to integrate in European society, they have to overcome incredible difficulties. And so their stories are often heroic stories, and that's something we want to highlight this afternoon. Migrants are not just people, poor people that should be helped. They are that as well, but are also, yeah, in my eyes, and I've met quite some migrants in my life, here in Belgium, but also elsewhere in Europe and outside, and that's my witness. I mean, yeah, this resilience of the people, and at the same time, and that's the other witness, we will have we will see also the resilience of the civil society in welcoming migrants, in helping them to integrate. And I think this is also useful to politicians, and I welcome also the MEPs we have this afternoon with us, and I thank them for being with us. But often we see that politicians, and it's understandable somehow, because they have to be re-elected, are very a bit afraid to really, yeah, to defend the migrant stories. And I think the resilience and the help that comes from the civil society can help them and everyone in the society to overcome this fear. So, okay, I will introduce our first witness. I present Mr. Mathieu Dansoko. He's 25 years old. He's born in Mali. And he's a young, strong, and generous man who works in a private company in Rome, in Italy. And that's how I've known him. But in order to achieve that, he has gone a long way, and we will listen to his story. He will speak in French. So I tell the audience, those who can't understand French, there is a button where you can select your interpretation so that you will hear everything in English, and I also thank the translators for this. Alors, Monsieur Mathieu, vous nous entendez? Vous pouvez prendre la parole pour votre témoignage.
Ok. Salut tout le monde, c'est un honneur d'être ici parmi vous. Ça me fait beaucoup de plaisir. Et quand même, un grand remerciement pour tout le monde qui m'écoute et qui me donne cette occasion-là. Vraiment, c'est un honneur. Comme vous l'avez tous entendu, je m'appelle Mathieu et je viens du Mali. C'est un pays africain à peine 1000 km de l'Italie et de l'Europe. Le Mali est un pays majorité musulmane. Moi, par contre, je suis chrétien catholique. Dans mon village, seules 3 familles étaient chrétiennes, dont le mien. Or, quelques difficultés avec certains voisins que le présence avant la guerre était possible. Si, quand j'étais à gosse, si j'avais demandé qu'est-ce que je serais devenu en grandissant, j'aurais répondu professeur d'histoire, car je puisse enseigner tous mes élèves ce que signifie l'histoire. Quand on connaît l'histoire et la culture des peuples, vous ne jugez pas et le préciser sont surmontés. J'étais un immigrant. Cela veut dire une pauvre personne ou une criminelle ou quelqu'un qui veut voler le travail des autres. J'avais juste besoin d'aide, comme tous les autres immigrants. J'avais dit, je viens du Mali. De nombreux Européens ont entendu parler de mon pays en apprenant des nouvelles et des attentats de 2012. Depuis 2012, mon pays est en guerre. Une guerre entre le gouvernement et le rebelle. Il oblige d'abandonner nos villages, amener nos enfants, nos frères, nos mères à quitter la maison que nous avons construite et commencer une autre vie dans un autre pays. Je vécu un village avec ma grand-mère. J'ai perdu mes parents quand j'étais enfant. Je suis allé à l'école, mais en 2012, mon histoire des immigrants a commencé. Quand les rebelles sont arrivés dans mon village, ils sont forcés des jeunes à s'enrôler. Je ne voulais fuir ou faire des guerres contre mon peuple. J'avais 15 ans. Je m'enfuis avec des argents que ma grand-mère m'avait donnés. Je traversais le désert à pied. Il y a près de centaines de personnes. Et il a fallu 3 mois pour arriver en Algérie. De nombreuses étapes et chaque jour, il fallait payer pour continuer. Et nous avons marché des journées entières, sans boire ni manger et sans pouvoir nous arrêter et beaucoup n'y ont pu parvenir. Et je ne sais pas comment je suis survécu. Quand je suis arrivé en Algérie, j'étais épuisé, tous mes argents. J'étais mineur et je ne trouvais pas d'aide. Et je vécu une période dans la rue. Puis, je trouvais un travail en disant que j'étais majeur. La société dans laquelle je travaille avait un santé à la frontière avec le Libye. Et lors d'inscription, les policiers libyens m'ont arrêté parce que je n'avais pas de documents. En Libye, j'ai passé 2 ans en différentes prisons libyennes où ils me demandaient continuellement de l'argent pour me faire sortir, mais je n'en avais pas. Donc, ils m'ont battu, ils m'ont forcé à travailler. Au bout de 2 ans, je n'avais aucune force. Et peut-être pour se débarrasser de moi, ils m'ont laissé mourir, pour ne pas me laisser mourir en prison. Ils m'ont mis sur un bateau de destination de l'Italie. Un mauvais voyage de 7 jours perdu en Méditerranée jusqu'à un arbre de garde-côte italien nous trouvait et nous amenait à Lampedusa. De là, j'étais envoyé dans un centre près de Rome et ma nouvelle vie a commencé. La guerre de mon pays n'est pas une guerre officielle. Cela signifie si quelqu'un devait décider si j'avais le droit d'être un réfugié dans mon pays d'accueil. Ils m'ont regardé, ils m'ont posé des questions. Ils m'ont toujours regardé et décidé si je pouvais rester. L'attente a été longue. En Italie, j'ai appris très tôt une expression qui ça, tu le sais. Combien de temps cela prendre? Quand je le serai, je peux vraiment rester. Qui ça, tu le sais. Mon premier mois a été difficile. Je n'arrive pas. J'ai arrivé dans une ville que je ne connais pas sans savoir parler la langue, sans savoir dire mes besoins et mes faire. Tous les sons que j'avais entendus étaient différents de ce que ma grand-mère mettait, de ma famille et de ma maison. J'ai dû m'habituer à une nouvelle musique. Lorsque mon premier été à Rome, j'ai passé des heures dehors devant un bar, à regarder les gens rentrer et écouter leurs paroles. J'ai essayé à connaître les noms des choses. La porte de ce bar, à quelque part de moi, me semble inaccessible. Chaque jour, j'espère savoir la force d'entrer pour demander un cappuccino, s'il vous plaît, comme tout le monde le faisait, juste un cappuccino, pour découvrir sa saveur et pour savoir si c'était différent de ce que de notre pays. Dans ma tête, je répétais des millions, des milliards de fois un cappuccino prego, mais à dire à haute voix était impossible pour moi. Cette porte de bar était devenue une frontière insurmontable. J'ai donc décidé de m'attaquer à ces frontières invisibles, de le surmonter aussi. Je recommençai à étudier l'italien dans un centre d'accueil. J'ai essayé d'aider si quelque chose était nécessaire. Lorsque le centre a effectué un travail de maintenance sur le système de protection incendie, je rencontre le directeur d'entreprise et je collabore avec lui. Il m'a alors proposé de continuer à faire un apprentissage avec lui. Je travaille dur parce que je sais à quel point peut être difficile à trouver un emploi. D'autres jeunes Italiens et les étrangers m'ont raconté combien de fois on n'a pas reçu et non pendant leur recherche de travail. Non, car les documents ne sont pas en règle. Non, car pas des expériences avec un Africain. Non, car il faut aussi connaître l'anglais. Non, parce que je n'ai pas confiance. Non, parce que tu n'as pas trop pris. Je compris que j'étais en sens et j'ai essayé de ne pas perdre. Je n'apprenais un métier en essayant toujours d'être disponible à écouter. Au fil du temps, ce stage est devenu mon métier, avec un DCI régulier, et pour cela, je suis vraiment content aujourd'hui. Je travaille, j'ai loué une petite maison avec un beau jardin et je rêvais d'avoir ma propre maison au fil du temps. Je puisse continuer à étudier l'italien. C'est là que j'ai rencontré la communauté de Sant'Egidio. D'abord, le voyelle, puis le consonante, qui, ensemble, faisant sonner l'italien. Cette nouvelle musique est devenue ma deuxième langue et je d'abord en écoutant et je l'adore. En effet, maintenant, on me dit que j'ai trop accent romain. Et je comprends que le professeur avait raison lorsqu'on m'avait dit si vous n'apprenez pas bien la langue, vous ne pouvez pas intégrer et réussir dans le travail. C'est vrai. Au bout, j'ai pensé que c'est trop difficile. Et je me suis demandé, je suis dans un mauvais pays. Vous ne pouvez pas prévenir pour arrière. L'attente est semblant trop long. Cependant, je me suis rendu compte que pendant cette attente, je devais construire quelque chose, étudier, rencontrer des gens, sortir de ma timidité. Je rencontrais de bonnes personnes et je ne voulais pas vivre en pensant que je suis juste une victime, mais une personne qui peut réagir, travailler et être utile au pays m'avait accueilli. Aujourd'hui, avec l'aide de nombreuses personnes, je peux dire que je me suis intégré. J'ai un travail qui me maintient en vie. Et surtout, je suis dans la communauté de Sant'Egidio, qui m'avait appris tellement de choses, m'avait aidé en moi. Et elle aide beaucoup d'autres qui sont des besoins, qui sont dans les besoins. Avec eux, avec des autres. Et c'était pendant mes vacances de travail, je suis allé à Lesbos pour aider. Et j'ai vu beaucoup des enfants des camps de réfugiés avec qui nous sommes allés à l'école car ils ne sont jamais allés à l'école. Lorsque je le disais tellement, ils voulaient jouer et faire la fête comme tous les autres enfants du monde. Je leur racontais beaucoup et qu'ils avaient fait des voyages difficiles et qui recherchent un avenir, mais qui avaient aussi besoin que quelqu'un pourrait leur parler en attendant les personnes et non en attendant qu'un immigrant et au problème. Ici à Rome, puis j'avais d'autres amis, des jeunes comme moi. J'ai des gens qui vivent dans le monde et beaucoup sont des Italiens et trop nombreuses sont asiatiques. Nous prenons des repas chauds et nous évitons nos déjeuners d'amitié à chaque dimanche. Ici en Europe, j'ai la volonté, le courage de l'aider quelques personnes et je suis reçu parce qu'il m'avait donné une chance. Je voudrais donc lancer un appel à notre Europe. Si je disais à notre Europe parce que aujourd'hui je me sens malien, mais aussi européen. Nous ne avons pas les personnes qui sont ni méchants, ni laides, ni différents. Ils voulaient avoir un avenir ensemble. Supprimons les murs. Je ne parle pas seulement du mur des frontières, mais le mur qui se divise et isole les gens. Donne-lui un sens. Il pourrait nous donner beaucoup et rendre cette belle Europe encore plus belle, comme beaucoup d'autres lieux. J'aime la vie. J'aimerais rire. J'aimerais santé. J'aimerais étudier. J'aimerais travailler avec vous. Aujourd'hui, en Italie est mon pays. Je sais que je pensais à vivre, construire une famille. Et peut-être si j'ai trouvé une petite amie. Mais je vais aussi contribuer à faire de l'Italie, de l'Europe, un endroit plus beau et plus accueillant. Tout le monde le rêve, l'ensemble d'un avenir. Merci à tous.
Thank you very much, Mathieu. Grand merci pour votre témoignage.
Merci à vous.
Et un grand merci aussi à l'interprétation parfaite en anglais. So yes, thank you for your witness, because I think you you underlined some very important points, topics after a very long and difficult journey. How you integrated well in as a new European, because today you feel like a new European. You speak about our Europe. And I think this is beautiful, because it's not about us and you, about we and them. It is about our common future. And I think you stressed it very well, how you overcame your, what you call your invisible frontiers, your inside frontiers. You overcame them by, of course, learning the language, and Italian became your second language. Also by committing yourself to work hard, and also by helping others, and that's very beautiful, because no one is so poor, so in need, that he cannot help someone else who is even more in need than him or her. And I think your witness is really beautiful. And so you also explained how you overcame your shyness, and I think you did, speaking in this webinar today. So I thank you very much. And the music of the new language, I think you have learned it. It's the Italian language, but it's also the language of friendship and solidarity, and a new European language. So I really thank you for that. And there is no chissà anymore. The chissà is now I'm here and you are here. Okay, we go to the next witness, which is the testimony of Arlette Sanseri. Arlette Sanseri is a French lady who lives close to Paris, and who has been active in welcoming migrants. And also her story is a story of resilience, and that resilience of the civil society. We don't have her live, unfortunately, but we will look to her witness that was filmed yesterday.
Please, a second.
Yes, please.
You hear me? Yes. I forgot to say at the beginning, we are around 90 people now participating in this webinar. And so people want to ask questions, and so they can do that in the question and answer, pressing the button down in the bottom of the screen, question and answer, and we'll try then to answer these questions at the end of the webinar. And then this webinar is being recorded, and some screenshots may be taken for the media. So have that also in mind. We assume that you being here, you don't have nothing in contrary to this. And we have to try and keep up with the time, because I know some MEP has to leave a bit early. So we'll hear this testimony now. Thanks.
So I belong to a Protestant community of a Protestant parish north of Paris, Enghien, which has the same name as a city in Belgium. And our pastor, Marc-Henri Vidal, was contacted at the end of 2018 by the French Protestant Federation, the Fédération Protestante de France, because at that time there was a flow of Syrian refugees trying to, by all means, to leave Syria and Lebanon where they were in camps and to find a place where hospitality would be given them. And as Christians, we thought that through the couloir humanitaire managed by la Fédération Protestante, la Conférence des Évêques de France, and Sant'Egidio, we would definitely want to take part in the experiment. For us, it was an experiment, of course. So we joined the program, and we contacted the Catholic priest of Montmorency, and the one in Enghien, and the one in Deuil-la-Barre, and together with the Conférence Saint-Vincent de Paul, we formed a group of about 12 people ready to take part in the project. So after meeting those the other members of the future group, we waited for instructions. And of course, we were totally naive in the process. We expected to be given, quote, quote, Christian Syrians, French-speaking, preferably, or English-speaking, if French was not available. And we thought that, you know, accompanying them would be nothing, absolutely easy, and we were ready to do it, no problem at all. Except that, little by little, we learned that we would be entrusted a family coming from a camp in Lebanon, run by Palestinians with the supervision of Sant'Egidio, that there would be 4 people, and they would be Muslims, which for our churches was a shock. Then we were told that they would arrive 2 months after we spoke with the people responsible with the project, which left us 60 days to find them a place to live. So we did, because we were very lucky, because in the group, one of us was responsible for the housing department in Deuil-la-Barre, the small town close to Enghien. And so we found a 3-room flat for 800 euros a month, which is of course a lot. And the Conférence Saint-Vincent agreed to foot the bill, to pay for the rent. So this was a real miracle. And I'm not sure that this could happen again, of course. So when in April 2019, Iba, who was 25, Bilal, who was 23, and their 2 children, Kadar, who was 3, and Walid, who was 5 months old, finally landed at Roissy Airport, we were ready, or so we thought, we were ready to welcome them. Anyway, we did welcome them. It was the middle of Ramadan that we were not quite prepared to, but it happened. And there was an immediate sympathy between our group and the parents, and naturally the 2 children who were totally lost. They thought they had prepared themselves, but of course the reality they had to face was quite different from whatever they might have imagined. But since our group consisted of people mostly above 60, in fact, ranging between 60 and 80, we considered them as almost children, our children. And they must have felt it because there was trust between us. And I think that trust that they felt towards us was certainly an enormous boost to their process of integration into a French Parisian suburb with different laws, different customs, different food, different everything, and a different climate. They thought it was very cold when we thought we were having a wonderful spring. Anyway, there was one problem to fix at the beginning, and that was language. They only spoke Arabic. And much to our surprise, we found that in our group, there was one ex-military, French military, who had served in Syria and who could speak Arabic. And also, Sant'Egidio wasn't far. And Claire Legrand, who came with, who had known them in Lebanon and had, I think, been part in the selection process, very often came or was on the phone to translate at the beginning. So the project, which sounded so far-fetched to us at the beginning, really started in May 2019. And we decided that we would assist the family for a year, probably 18 months. In fact, we terminated the project, in fact, in July 2020. So 2 full years to accompany that family. And now I'm going to speak of what we did, what we as hosts, and what they felt or communicated during that period. In fact, it was extremely interesting and extremely rewarding, although very hard in a way. From our point of view, we knew very little of the administrative context in which the refugees were situated. So we learned in the process, the learning process was rather rough. I'm laughing because I know that some of you who are familiar with the thing understand what I'm referring to. The complexities, let's to say the hurdles of our French administration. But the other side of the coin is the richness of what we can offer, very often for free or at a very low cost, in terms, for instance, of French learning the language. There are lots of possibilities to learn French for practically free through the mairie, the municipalities, town halls, social services of all kinds, local associations, and also plenty of private citizens around us ready to give some of their time with books and knowing what to do to help people of a foreign country learn French. That was our side. And above all, what we discovered was the extraordinary willpower and determination of Bilal and Iba to learn. And they were so fast, they were so quick, we were amazed. In fact, orally at least, they mastered the language much more quickly than we would have imagined. And I think that the feeling of being safe, being in security, their children not being threatened either by hunger or disease or firearms, the sense of being surrounded with friends, with people willing to be of assistance, with people willing to help, certainly was an enormous boost to their motivation, and also the fact that they were young and that they unfortunately had had so little schooling that they were thirsty for, in fact, learning things. So I think what the atmosphere we could provide, plus above all their own determination, made a miracle, because within 1 year they who had not one word of French, or perhaps merci and bonjour when they arrived, could speak and be understood and understand fluently their surroundings. Now, the learning how to write French and learning the grammar was, of course, a slower process, but I must say that the learning methods were very good. Esivam, in particular, was excellent, and I'm not saying that they are masters of the French language, of course not, but they can write, they can send emails, they can read the newspaper, at least partially, and they make themselves perfectly understood. So even after 12 months of intensive learning, the results were spectacular, and honestly, we admired their capacities at adaptation and at learning when they came from such desperate surroundings. The accomplishment was spectacular, and we are deeply, deeply respectful. We cannot say how much we admire them for doing what they did. It was excellent. From the other points of view, I must say that locally, there was an enormous show of generosity from all kinds of people who provided furniture, who provided food, who provided clothing. Whenever some need was expressed through the parishes, we found someone who had something to give, and people gave. They gave willingly. Some of them gave money, which was always of help, but most of them gave material things, which were very much appreciated. And we, as a committee, felt that we had the support of our parishes, and that was enormous, an enormous help. And the only thing I would like to add, it's not because they got their residence permit for 10 years that the state support must stop. That is to say, integration is a difficult process, and we never know whether their exile is going to be a permanent exile or a temporary one. So I would suggest that after they get their permit to stay, as I say, their residence permit of 10 years till 2029, there should be an official, either European or French follow-up, a checkup, I would say, like after 3 years and 2 years before the end of their permit, because choices will have to be made at that point, and those choices are not very easy to make. Which citizenship? Are they going to immigrate? Do they want to stay in France? Do they want to vote? Or do they want to apply for naturalization? Is it an option? All those questions must not be left to their own considerations. I think they must be helped. They should be helped. And since the European Union and the French government, state, nation, are part of the process, that process of integration or choice should not be left at the last moment to the people concerned. That is what we think as a group and what I personally recommend. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much for this powerful witness. Yes, Arlette spoke about the admiration in front of the refugees welcomed, and I think that this is a feeling for many people that have gone through this experience. And she spoke also about the generosity of so many people, and I think that this generosity exists on the field once it is organized. As we did with the humanitarian corridors, in an ecumenical way, because this lady is a Protestant, others are Catholics, others are even Orthodox or Anglican or whatever. But I think that we have to find this real forces that are here in our society to build this this welcoming culture, and to support also a politics in Europe that is able to really integrate the migrants. And in the end, Arlette did also some very concrete proposals about this. But without further delay, I will give the floor to Father Prieto for the discussion with our MEPs. Thank you.
So now we start the second part of this webinar. We've heard these voices of migrants, these voices of also receiving people, and now we pass the word to policymakers. We welcome also, I saw he was here before, yes, Damian Boislaga. Yeah, I think I pronounced it well. Welcome to us, to this webinar. I repeat again, if somebody wants to ask questions of these 88 participants we have at this moment, well, you could put them in the question and answer box, and we'll try to answer them at the end. So I don't know to who to give the word before. I think someone has to leave at 16:55, I was told. Maybe.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
Okay, maybe I'll leave the word to Javier Zarzalejos. Maybe is that okay?
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I hope you can hear me and you can see me well. And thank you for putting together this event, this webinar. And thank you again for your approach to this issue, for changing the usual terms under which this issue is discussed. The idea that we have also to see another immigration in another perspective, of a strong and resilient people ready to take risks, searching for opportunities and personal development, and not just living on public subsidies or social benefits. Because this is part of the effort that we have to undertake of reconciling reality and perception, which I think is a very serious gap that we have. All the most, let's say, serious research has been done points to the fact that this gap between perception and reality of immigration is particularly wide in Europe. Basically, I would say that there are less immigrants in Europe than we usually think there are. They are much more educated than we usually think they are, and they absorb much less public resources that we think they absorb. And the contribution to our economies are far greater than we think. And when I say we, I'm just referring to some sort of common opinions in our society. And I think this is important, this effort to reconcile the reality and the perception of immigration, because this gap exists not only in the opinion that we have or the perception we have of immigration. This gap exists among European Union member states, which I'm Spanish, so I can say that Spain so far is leading the ranking of societies where public opinion is more open-minded and positive towards the phenomenon of immigration, but that is not the case in some other European countries. But also it exists, this gap also exists within our societies. And I must add that according to these researches, attitudes towards immigration depend very much on age and education, the fact is, one of the conclusions that researchers come to is that the older and the less educated, the more susceptible to have a negative opinion towards immigration and its impact on society. Well, I guess that it is important, your own national background when you talk about immigration. I come from Spain, and Spain has always been a country of very intense flows of immigration movements towards Latin America, but also internally among regions in Spain, and certainly to some other countries in the European Union, such as France, Belgium, Luxembourg, Germany, the Netherlands, outside the European Union, Switzerland, when there was a massive immigration in the 60s from Spain. So we have our own history of Spanish citizens going abroad. But Spain has also had a massive flow of immigration of up to 5 million in less than 7 years, which obviously were years of rapid and unsustained economic growth. And I have to say that such a high number of immigration came to Spain with no particularly impact on the basic balances of society. And it's true that as far as Spain is concerned, our immigration has come mainly from Latin America, Spanish-speaking and mainly Christian immigrants. Then we have strong communities, large communities of citizens who came to Spain from countries which now are members of the European Union, Romania, Bulgaria, and there's also an important presence of Muslim communities, basically from Morocco. But this presence of Muslims immigrants is not unknown in Spain. Quite the contrary, there is a long-standing immigration from Morocco. So, in my opinion, this takes us to the issue of integration. We have now, we are about to start the discussion of a very ambitious proposal by the European Commission, the so-called Immigration and Asylum Pact. Obviously, it is mainly focused on the need to manage the flow of immigrants, to improve the procedures, to take care of more vulnerable people coming to our countries. It's also a welcome development that this proposal by the Commission highlights the need for meaningful solidarity, for a real solidarity, not only among European members, but also with third countries, and obviously particularly countries of origin and countries of transit. And this improvement in the procedures and in border management also includes the improvement of what we could say, the reinforcement of the respect to human rights of immigrants. And I would say starting from life itself as the basic human right. And I would say that, it wouldn't be fair if we just overlook the fact that over the last 5 years, the naval missions of the European Union, along with member states, have rescued almost 600,000 people at sea. So we have to continue making an effort on that. But integration is key, and in my opinion is going to take a central role in the discussion about immigration. And what we have seen here, what we have heard here, are very valuable testimonies. In my opinion, we have very strong instruments for integration, which is, the education system, the health system, active civil society, as we can see now. I mean, churches, non-profit organizations. These are tools that we have to, make the most of them in the process of integration, which obviously is a two-way avenue, and it requires effort from the part of those who come to Europe, but also it requires effort from both governments, public administrations, and civil society as such. And also integration is a very important issue, in my opinion, and a very important political issue, because it leads us to the question of what binds us together, and the question of values. When we say that someone has to integrate, and I think that integration is the best way to make the most of the opportunities that immigrants are looking for. But when you talk about integration, you also have to answer the question, where do we have to integrate in? What is the set of values that we have to share? What is the set of rights and duties? What is acceptable? What is not acceptable? What binds us together as citizens in politically organized communities? Probably there is no perfect or failure-proof model of integration, but the testimonies that we have heard are very meaningful in the sense that we all need to take a very proactive attitude towards this problem, not expecting everything from other side, but also take a proactive stance on this issue, taking into account also that this is a two or double dimension issue. Most of the Europeans, the European citizens, think that immigration is much more of a European issue than a national issue, and I think that is a good starting point for our discussion. And at the same time, I would like to stress the importance of the European Union not only being good, as we are probably, at drafting laws, but also good at the delivery, good at the implementation. And it means not also to have good legal instruments, but have good procedures, good resources, and sufficient resources to put in place all these principles. And certainly we need, and that is something that is on the agenda of the European Union, a very specific, ambitious, and well funded strategy towards Africa for our common interest. So I really can't say whether the Asylum and Migration Pact is going to fly, but at least that is going to be instrumental in raising the key questions that we have to deal with in the light also of the experience that Europe has now gone through. And I'm referring to the peak of the crisis in 2015, 2016, but also in the light of the different policies that have been applied and the changing nature of the phenomenon of immigration, including the increasing business that human trafficking represents in this problem. So I would stop there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, VP Javier Zarzalejos. So now I'm leaving the floor to Damian Boeselager. I think interesting concepts were presented by MEP Javier Zarzalejos. He spoke about the importance of education in our attitude towards migration, the importance of the national background of different states, the importance of an active civil society, I think, and also church organizations in this, church organizations or church-based, faith-based actors. The question of integration, I think this also from a church point of view is very important. The Pope insists very much, it's not only enough to receive, it's we also have to integrate, no? So I think this is very important. And he spoke also of an interesting concept that also Pope Francis in some way mentioned when he spoke about the dreams for Europe, an active or a meaningful or a fruitful solidarity. I think that's a very interesting concept. So I leave the word now to Damian Boeselager. I'm very pleased that he's here today with us.
Perfect. Thank you, Father. Let me maybe just give you two instances of my past to explain a bit where I'm coming from. So actually, my first touch point with migration was in the Dicastery for Integral Human Development, basically working on the topic of migration as an intern. So that's, just gives you a bit of context of what mindset I was coming from. And then in 2015, I was also more by chance than anything else in the German Office for Migration and Asylum at that time. So that basically showed me a bit how at least European, but probably global, the topic is, and that it doesn't make sense to just look at it from one member state perspective. And that's why later on I also founded a European movement that basically stands up for more European collaboration and tries to basically say that the most of the topics of our times cannot be solved by one nation, but need collaboration across borders. So when I now look at the topic of migration and asylum, it's very much from this perspective of how can we also ensure that we have a European system that works and not only from a member state perspective. I work currently on both issues, I would, even if it's a bit of an artificial perspective, I think from the church, but the issue of more labor migration and the other issue of more asylum. And I mean, when I look at our asylum system currently, for me, it's one of the biggest failures of that the European Union has, and delegitimizes very much the European Union. And that is for me really something very sad to observe. And I hear it also in the testimonies. So I've traveled also the Greek islands, for example, to look at the Moria before it burnt down. And I've also traveled to other places to just really see what is happening. And I can say, I think the current policy is really a policy by deterrence, by suffering, trying to ensure that people live in tents, which in Europe doesn't really make any logical sense in our times, I think. And making it hard for people to arrive and go through due process. I mean, it doesn't even mean that we need to potentially, change our asylum system and how we define what is asylum and who is an asylum seeker or not. But I think how we really treat the dignity of human beings while they go through due process is absolutely unacceptable, no matter whether you are for a closed or more open society. So that's, I think, absolutely clear. And there's now two directions you can look at that. One is the short term. So how can we get out of this humanitarian crisis, which it creates so much suffering? And then the more, right now, and then the more longer term in terms of the legislative frameworks that we set up via the new pact, which we don't know, as my colleague Javier Zarzalejos also said, we don't know how long this will take until we have a new system set up. But really, for me, this is a priority, and I think also measure my success of these 5 years in the European Parliament by the fact if I have at least contributed to a better framework, but hopefully also contributed to a better situation on the ground in a more shorter term. And on labor migration, I'm trying to push this a lot also from the European perspective, because as I said, I'm really very much focused on this European idea. And I think here also we need to really improve in two dimensions. One is when it comes to creating new pathways, because migration is a fact, as people have been saying before, and currently we're not really offering enough pathways, I think, for regular labor migrants to come to Europe. And I think that's something where the European Union can actually help a lot. But this, and I will come back to this later, will need a lot of work also from your side. And the second part is, I think we really need to strengthen the rights of the people who are already here. And I've written a group position for the Greens EFA with whom I sit in the European Parliament in their faction. And I've drafted the group position basically saying that we really need to strengthen the rights of the people who are already here next to basically creating new channels. And here, obviously, we come to the topic of integration. The European Union doesn't really have a lot of power when it comes to integration, but there are positions and initiatives by the Commission to try to push this. And I will also always support this, because I think what we see is that people often, or like many people that come here, when I talk to them, have the experience that they have a double trauma of first losing parts of their identity in the country they came from, and then coming here and not being offered a new identity that is actually open enough to accept them. And so this is a double trauma which can be quite dramatic, at least from what I hear. And I think it's something that we really need to get better. And there are concrete policy proposals for this. You know, allowing asylum seekers to work from day one could be one thing that also goes very much hand in hand with the social teaching of the Catholic Church, I think, and understanding the value of work. And I mean, I think it's also a psychological fact that this is very helpful in many ways and can drive integration. And there are other things that go hand in hand that are more of administrative nature when it comes to recognition of skills and diplomas and regularization of those who are currently illegal here. There are many additional aspects of that, but I really believe that we should try to improve also on the rights of people that are currently here, the basic needs and rights. And yes, I do also believe that there's a certain responsibility for people who are coming here to integrate. But to be honest, I think they are not the reason why it's currently not working. It's really more on our systems and our view of our identity rather than those who are coming here most of the time. So maybe to close with, I think to somehow create opportunity to have a positive view on migration. First of all, as I said, I think on asylum we really need to be better, and we cannot. And I'm very happy to see you here, Javier Lejos, also to talk about this. As Christians, I think look at the situation that is currently happening at our borders, without like being completely shocked. And too often, coming from a conservative background, I feel that conservative governments don't do enough in that sense, and therefore I think it's really important that also the churches become very and are already very vocal, but really try to influence the national governments on these points. And for new pathways for labor migration, or for labor migration in general, I think here also there's a huge opportunity. It's not as negatively connotated in the public discourse, but without pushes from all actors, again, businesses, unions, but also churches, to create new legal pathways, not much will happen. I can see it currently when I'm negotiating the blue card revision for highly skilled workers, basically a visa system, how little appetite there is currently in the member states. And I think this can change, because there are positive narratives around labor migration, but currently they're really insufficient. So your work is also needed on this front. I hope this gives a bit of an idea of what where I currently am and what I'm thinking about, and I'm very much looking forward to any questions or your ideas also later on per email or in future meetings.
So thank you very much. I didn't know this background of yours, that you had already a very close contact with the work of the church in migration. So you have the two perspectives. Now, the work of the church is sometimes prophetic, wants to be prophetic, wants to have a message of, we do advocacy as well. But then policymakers have an important role as well to try to make this possible through laws and through policies, and that sometimes is not easy, as we're seeing for this year. This pact of migration and asylum have to do still a lot of work on it. So now I give the word, I give the floor to Dr. Archisti, no? She's a photographer, so we have a visual perspective of what is migration also. And then maybe we have a very short discussion between us if we can. Okay, so yours is the floor. I don't want to take more time.
Thank you, and thanks both the team at COMECE and Sant'Egidio for organizing this very interesting discussion today, and to everyone else who's participating and has shared their testimonies and perspectives. Let me just check if I have control here. Yeah. So I'm going to briefly say a little bit about myself, and then I'll be talking kind of on a similar vein to what MEP Bözelager has been discussing about the situation kind of currently at the borders in the camps, specifically in Greece. So I'm originally from Athens in Greece, and I have a background in biochemistry and molecular medicine, but I'm currently focused on issues of health and discrimination in humanitarian settings, which is how I kind of came into the world of dealing with migration. I initially became interested in the importance of agency and dignity whilst working with asylum seekers in Greece over the past 4 to 5 years in different capacities, both on the islands and on the mainland. And what struck me the most was, as MEP Bözelager mentioned briefly, the shocking lack of both dignity and agency in the coordinated response that was being implemented on the ground. And this gap, as was mentioned earlier, between perhaps what the perceived situation is at the maybe decision-making level versus what's actually happening on the ground, where thousands of vulnerable people with pre-existing trauma and medical conditions were being left to live under harsh, violent, and undignified conditions in Europe. Why? So over time, these observations and questions evolved and eventually led to the creation of our book, specifically about Idomeni, called Idomeni Waiting for Home, which was written in collaboration with Austrian sociologist Nina Walch and the support of the Initiative Minderheiten Tirol, the local Tyrolean minorities initiative. And in this book, we use a combination of images, observations, sociological theory to specifically discuss this issue of resilience and of dignity in camps in Greece at the border. And despite the fact that the photos I'm showing you today were generated in Idomeni almost 5 years ago, 4.5 to 5 years ago, I think that it's quite poignant that what they show is still relevant today, that even 5 years later, people are still having to live under the same conditions in Europe. So what does this say about the European response and Greece's handling of the situation so far over the past few years? Why are we still making people live this way on European soil? Is this the acceptable cost of protecting our borders and acting as the proud shield or aspida of Europe, as President von der Leyen declared last year? So going back to the question, what are the roles of agency, dignity, and a sense of normality in building resilience? What do we think about when we think about dignity? What do we think about when we think about agency? Dignity, it's about feeling safe. It's about feeling clean, healthy, respected, a sense of acceptance, looking good, being able to make decisions about our own life, having an active role in determining our future. And in Idomeni in 2016, between 10 to 15,000 people were living in a field along the border in northern Greece. And similar camps or informal settlements still exist both in Greece and other parts of Europe today. Settlements where even the most basic sources of dignity are complicated. For example, in the image you're seeing now, this image shows one of only 3 such water stations that were present in Idomeni. This was a settlement with 10 to 15,000 people, as I mentioned. There were also 48 portable toilets, 2 of which with disabled access, and 30 showers with cold water. For a bit of context, that's 1 water station for 5,000 people, 1 toilet for 300 people, and 1 shower for 500 people. If I can go to the next photo, yeah. But this was almost 5 years ago, right? As we said. So what is the situation like now? What if we look to places like Karatepe in Lesbos? Despite the fact that millions have been spent and the legal framework outlining the basic reception standards for asylum seekers already exists, the reality on the ground is that these basic standards are not in place today. Even today, if we look to the temporary camp in Karatepe and Lesbos, built after the Moria fire last September, people are having to rely on the ocean because of the lack of running water. They have only recently installed buckets with warm water in lieu of showers, and it's been there for 5 months already. For example, also this image from Idomeni that shows the main distribution point for food. People were having to queue in line for hours in single file in order to receive their food. And while of course there are reasons for this kind of system in terms of distribution and crowd control, it is not a sustainable situation for the long term. Yet, unfortunately, there are still people having to live like this. It's still the norm, and as Dr. Nutting, a British NHS doctor, drew light to the situation in a publication a couple of years ago, this kind of situation only causes more distress, more frustration, and leads to an ever deteriorating living situation for people in the camps. Now, let's go back. Sorry, technical issues. So how does agency come into this? When you're trying to build this sense of dignity, it's very important to also have a strong sense of agency. Now, agency is broadly defined as the capacity of individuals to act independently and to make their own free choices. It gives us a sense of ownership and control over our lives. Something that perhaps we are no longer taking for granted after a year in lockdown, where we have faced the uncertainty and lack of control over our future. But what about people who have been living in camps for months or even years, waiting for their applications to be processed, unable to legally seek work yet or access the education system that was mentioned earlier, or even know where they're going to be in 2 months' time? We as humans deal with situations of uncertainty and a loss of agency by trying to maintain control of whatever we still can, through things like, as shown in this current photo, the preparation of our own food instead of depending on queues, where we can find comfort in the familiar food that we know from back home, nutritious food, and also looking after our health needs. For example, I met a small girl in Idomeni who is a celiac. She is unable to process certain types of starch and wheat. And yet all of the food that was being distributed was predominantly pasta and sandwiches. So how is she supposed to eat when she's living there for months? Or, for example, through the empowerment of people by using their skills and know-how in order to better serve their community. Here we see a man who has converted his tent into a small shop to allow people within the camp to have access to the small goods that they might need and cannot otherwise access because the nearest town is quite far away. Or using skills in order to give back to the community as well. Here we see a barber who is giving someone a trim. In a situation where everything is dirty and chaotic, being able to just maintain your appearance and have control over the way you look can be huge, both to your self-esteem, to your mental health, and to give some kind of control in the sense of chaos, as well as for the barber using his skills from back home to do something to help the people around him. This is how you build resilience. This is how you build agency. Also, celebrating your culture and preserving cultural heritage through sharing stories and music. This is another source of comfort, another source of perhaps connecting with the home that you've had to leave behind and to connect to the people around you who are having a shared experience. Or finding moments of joy where you can celebrate a unified culture, a unified background, something that brings people together and allows for a moment of joy and unity in an otherwise crazy environment. The importance of finding small moments of joy and innocence and establishing a sense of normality in an otherwise chaotic and unpredictable environment. These are the things that we do as humans in order to try and preserve our sense of agency, preserve our mental health, preserve a sense of dignity and a sense of normality in situations that are outside of our control. But so, and through these small aspects of daily life that come together, we build resilience. This is to help us stay strong in the face of hardship and to eventually recover once it has passed. Faced with growing frustration, disappointment, anger, and fear, people in Idomeni across generations as backgrounds, as you can see in this picture, attempted to try and regain some sense of control over their future and draw attention to their situation. We have seen similar unrest, tension, and protests over and over again in facilities around Greece, especially in the islands of the Aegean, in Vathi, Vial, Moria, Karatepe. The people who had turned to Europe in search of safety are now asking Europe for respect, empathy, and solidarity. Against this multi-layered backdrop, their struggle can be seen as part of a greater collective movement for social and legal recognition, a way of becoming active protagonists in their own stories rather than passively enduring in silence. Oh, sorry. Yeah. And yet, resilience allows for hope to continue, despite this endured uncertainty, lack of dignity, violence, and social exclusion. This hope remains for a better, safer future. And sorry, I'm having, yeah. And so I feel that at this point, we should really ask ourselves as Europeans, as people, what we can do to help foster resilience and solidarity, to allow people to at least live with the basic dignity and normality for them to feel safe and to heal. Do we continue to propagate the trauma, the deterioration of mental health in thousands of vulnerable people at our doorsteps? Do we continue to fortify ourselves, constructing closed facilities, pushing people back at our borders, as is currently being discussed in the ongoing Frontex investigation, or silently accepting that people continue to live like this? Is this our legacy? This is a testimony from a medical doctor working with the MSF in Lesbos in 2018. And the situation then is still the same today. We've created a mental health emergency at Europe's doorstep through the way that we have been treating the people who have come to us seeking help. Looking back at the settlement of Idomeni in 2016 shows that these men, women, and children displayed incredible strength, resilience, and determination to have come this far and been through so much and continue, hoping for a better future. To talk about them as only victims would not do them justice. If the photos and testimonies that we heard earlier today tell us one story, then it is the story of survivors, people that left home behind in search of safety and a new life, only to find themselves stuck between borders in an unnecessarily created state of existential uncertainty and hardship. And yet, despite everything they have experienced, these people still do not lose hope and manage to carry on with their lives, as shown by the incredible stories of Mathieu and Arlette earlier. The temporary migrant settlement in Idomeni was eventually demolished at the end of May 2016. The people living there were taken to facilities across northern Greece, and their tents were swept away by bulldozers. However, the struggle for dignity, normality, and recognition for some of those who stayed in Idomeni and for 1,000 others across Europe continues even today, as they still wait for a safe and dignified place to call home. That is what I wanted to say.
Thank you very much, Dr. Alkisti, for these powerful images, because you give a testimony with image, but also with with your voice, and also for bringing to the front this concept of agency, which helps individuals and societies to foster this resilience and human dignity. So thank you very much for your contribution. I'm afraid Father Manuel has to leave us already. Is that correct? Okay.
Unfortunately, I have to, but thanks very much to everybody. I leave the floor to you, Jan.
Thank you, Father, for being with us. So we are almost at the end of our meeting, but I will just continue for some minutes to answer some questions or to have some questions answered which came in. The first question I will address to Mr. Boeselager, who is still there with us. Mr. Zarzalejos had to leave us. But the question is, can legal migration or resettlement to Eastern EU member states help change the perception of migrants in those countries, and thus, on the long run, help with establishing a true solidarity mechanism when it comes to relocating refugees from the external borders of the EU? I think this is not an easy question. I think the EU has been battling with it for some years now. But it comes also, this is also linked to the question, I think, a bit of Dublin and the revision of Dublin, and how to share this common challenge because you said, I think, also in your speech that that it's more a European issue than a national issue, but it's not how this is really tackled. So how do you see the involvement of Eastern European countries?
So just first, an interesting statistic that you might have heard about, but in Poland is actually the country which gives out the most work permits in Europe, apparently, because they have a lot of Ukrainian workers coming. So there are, when you look at labor migration, interesting trends where we should be aware that there's a certain openness in some of the member states that you might think that they are not so open. The second point I want to make is that I mean, in the proposal which we made a year ago, also within the Greens EFA group in the European Parliament, we also take into account, and that brings me back to agency, the preferences by the asylum seekers themselves when they are supposed to be relocated. So I think it's important to not necessarily, force people into member states where they don't want to go, but also where maybe integration might be more difficult. So I'm not saying that everybody should just be free to pick and choose, but if there's a certain preference that can be taken into account, I think that's something that we should take, that we should consider. But on the other hand, I do understand where the question comes from, because if I look at the numbers for Germany, the communities with the highest number of migrant or like third country nationals living there are the ones which are often very much more open to integration and migration. So there are definitely positive effects that we can observe, but it's a bit of a difficult question of how to achieve that without making it really hard for the asylum seekers or the migrants themselves. So, but when it comes to solidarity, I think in the end, countries are big, and there are within also the more difficult countries places which are more open and to migration. And I think we should really try to make sure that all countries take responsibility for people who want to live within the European Union or seeking asylum within the European Union. And so I do believe very much in a solidarity mechanism that actually works. I mean, Dublin is not functioning. Everybody knows it's not functioning. It's also not, doesn't even deserve the name solidarity mechanism because it's not. So I think whatever we come up with next needs to be better than what we have currently.
And where are we in changing Dublin mechanism?
Yeah, that's, the proposal by the European Commission for the new pact is basically, the understanding that this new commission has that the last commission failed in proposing a new common European asylum system. So they looked at what happened after 2015 and had to realize that none of the proposals they proposed were actually even be able. I mean, the member states were even were unable to even discuss them. So like how this actually works in practice is the Justice and Home Affairs Council, which is basically our ministers of the interior, so Seehofer for my country and the other interior ministers for the other countries, would come together, and they wouldn't even be able to sit in a table to discuss these proposals anymore because the relationship, like the topic was so toxic. So, and that's where the EU then fails, because you have the Commission proposing something, then it goes into Parliament, which finds some position via, you know, a majority, and then it goes into this Justice and Home Affairs Council for the member states, and there was not even a position developed, and then the whole thing, you know, is a bit faulty. That's why I'm a big fan of EU reform, but we can talk about this in another setting. But
in another setting, yeah.
Yeah, but just to finish very quickly. So now the Commission made a new proposal, a bit too late from my perspective, and I thought at least they had checked with the different member states whether, you know, they will find support. But to be honest, it looks like shortly after a letter came out by some of the countries that are more at the borders that are already saying like this approach doesn't really help them. And so I'm not so certain that this will be done within the next year or even two. Yeah? And that's why I also insisted that we have to tackle the situation on the ground right now.
Yeah, thank you for giving us some insights in also this difficult EU policy making on this. But it's not just EU; it's also of course the member states for sure. So I think that the role of the churches and civil society is important here to let our voice be heard and to try to change to bring change also from within. Good. I still have some other questions. Yeah, they're coming in, so we can continue for maybe another 15 minutes if you want. One question, not to anyone particular, but anyone on the panel can maybe take the floor. I don't know if even Mathieu, but it's Mario Bianchi, an Italian writer. He talks about 3 types of approaches to insert migrants in our societies. And this is about 1, assimilation, 2nd, insertion, and 3rd, integration, where, so with assimilation, you don't have, there is no margin to keep your own roots, where insertion means that 2 bubbles coexist in the same society, and 3rd, integration, where you have accepted differences and values as an harmonization of both cultures. Where are we as a EU here in this integration? What is our difficulty? What type are we doing? So yeah, maybe I don't know who wants to take the floor about this issue.
So just to quickly jump in, I sadly have to leave because I'm late already for my next appointment, but okay. I just wanted to thank everyone and
thank you very
have
much,
a good discussion.
Mr. Buslager, for being with us. Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't know who wants to take the floor in this issue.
I mean, I'm not an expert, but I feel like it's a little bit of all 3, depending on where you look. I feel like there's probably a certain degree of people in Europe who perhaps are more in favor of the complete assimilation to adapt to culture and language, whereas I would say that our reality at the moment is perhaps closer to insertion, where there is a bit of an overlap between maintaining background and adjusting to the local culture, with perhaps integration being like the as you've described it in your question, being kind of the more desired outcome. I don't know.
Okay. Right. Someone else want to come in on this topic? No, then we move to the next question. I want to say that we've moved beyond our time, so translation into French is not there anymore. That's how it works, and we thank our translators for their wonderful job, because they really did one. I was listening to French and to English. It was very well done. Just to continue some other questions. a question to you. If you have had feedback from people who have seen your pictures, your photos, compare to presentation by their country's media. Yeah, have you had feedback on your pictures, and if it is different from what the usual media are giving?
Yeah, that's actually something that comes up quite often as a comment, because a lot of the depictions in the media are either in response to some kind of protest or violence that has broken out somewhere, or kind of showing the great masses of almost victimized portrayal of people, rather than trying to show the kind of small moments in the day-to-day lives where there's dignity and resilience and strength. So this is something that has been mentioned before when I've shown my photos to places. And I think that that's something that perhaps should be shown more in the media generally, to give a more holistic and three-dimensional approach, portrayal of people as humans and not just these victims of their story.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, we go to a last question, and then we will conclude. The question is: how were the beneficiaries of from the French humanitarian corridor selected? Yeah, that's a question I can answer, since this I think is about the Sant'Egidio project about humanitarian corridors with our different partners in different countries, especially Italy, France, and Belgium. Yeah, the selection, well, it depended a bit on, in France, it was people living in Lebanon, coming from either Syria or Iraq. So both were admitted to France. I think a quota of 1,000 people, and of course the identification of the candidates for this humanitarian corridor was done according to vulnerability. Vulnerability was the real point, and it can be many things. Often it were families with children. Often families with the husband lacking, so a woman with children, and also especially medical and physical needs were taken into account. Yeah, it was not just about Christians, of course not. Of course, being part of a minority can be a factor of vulnerability, but as we heard in our witness as well, they welcomed also yeah, Muslims, of course, coming from Syria, from Iraq. Okay, if you want to know more about it, let me know, but I will leave it here. Okay, can I conclude our session? Are you still with? Okay, good, because we are 10 minutes over time. So let me conclude and thank you, all of you. First of all, our witness, je remercie Mathieu, merci d'avoir été avec nous, merci de votre témoignage vraiment fort et émouvant, et aussi un peu humoristique. Voilà, nous vous souhaitons tout le bien pour votre parcours en Italie et en Europe. Voilà. So thank you for each one of you, for your those who participated, those who attended, those who put questions. If you have more questions, please don't hesitate to email us, which is COMECE or Sant'Egidio. And I thank also the wonderful team of Sant'Egidio and COMECE for this flawless collaboration. And also thanks to you, Dr. Akisti. Thank you. Good evening.
Thank you. Thank you.
And bye-bye.